Welcome back to Expertise Exposed, day 2. We are gonna start with, you wanna say something? Okay, we'll start with the video first, and then, for those of you who weren't here yesterday.
You have the UAE, you have Yemen, Oman, Saudi Arabia. You also have India, which isn't part of the Middle East, but they do have the country, like it borders the Arabian Gulf. You have Pakistan, you have that entire region there.
Yeah.
Dubai.
The one in Dubai? Dubai. It's in Dubai. Yeah.
Dubai.
There's the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world.
I'd say it's different.
I would say up and coming.
Rich.
Prosperous.
Right now, conflict, just because of the news media here.
Developed or up and coming.
Maybe eclectic.
Beauty, breathtaking.
High. Awesome.
Cultural. Maybe colorful?
It looks like tremendous.
I know that Dubai is modernizing rapidly.
I know there's an architecture award called the Aga Khan Architecture.
So, I'm going to introduce myself again for those of you who weren't here yesterday. I'm Munira Rabai, and I'm a fifth-year architecture student. And I'm also co-organizing the symposium with Abdurrahman, and he is an MARC 2 candidate. So I'll start out with the video because Team X here, they're dispersed all over the audience, but the 3 girls over here worked on the video, and basically what they did is they went around campus, and first question was, what do you know about the Gulf? And so that was the part where everyone was, and no one really knows about that area. So we wanted to kind of expose and show the perception of what the students here know about the area. And then they went around and talked about the architecture and the Gulf, and as you saw. But so again, I'm gonna describe more about the symposium. This started as a student-run initiative, and with the help of the school, with the help of the faculty, with the help of the dean, Professor Sanin, Professor Anda French, and all the speakers here, this became a reality today, right? And do you wanna start by saying something?
So Abdul, you can call me Abdul. And I want to thank you all for being here, and thank the speakers who came all the way here, and the School of Architecture that helped in organizing this. So I'll follow up on the discussion and the sessions that we had yesterday. The title, Expertise Exposed, Consultancy in the Gulf, or XX. XX is meant to expose the reliance on expertise in developing the modern city in the Gulf. Expertise exposed, uncovered in yesterday's session on consultancy, the model at work of developing the city, or may I say, developing segregated interventions with the lack of a strategic vision for the city as a whole. We saw that the model at work is still triumvirate constituents in action. The state is the landlord, the capital is the provider, or in some other cases, the state again, or financial investors. And finally, the development, the intervention, is conglomerations of forms that demand sense of citizenship for multiple social classes in the city. With this conversation emerged the need for a new X, the X for exchange, that Professor Sanin called for in his introduction yesterday. The emerging X was called upon to advance expertise in multiple professions. And while it is easy to confuse architects as social activists, Professor Rabat asked us to approach the reality of the architectural profession, that architects are in fact service providers. So what is the profession of the architect today, and what sort of expertise the architect owns? I leave this for our next session, X Practice, and call upon Professor Sanin to introduce our guest speaker today, George Fistatio.
Oh, it's so exciting. I'm incredibly proud to be part of a student-led initiative that has gone well beyond the expectations, both by the quality of the discussion, the quality of the guest, the excitement that it has created, and the opportunity it has afforded us to work or walk into a world that we have, I think, as it would be fair to say, very little knowledge of. I started yesterday saying that one of the biggest motivation I had to be part of this is basically my own ignorance, but also recognizing the institutional ignorance that exists on a part of the world that not only plays an incredible role in our daily lives, energy, money, taste, but that also I would put forward that it has shaped our profession and what we understand both as a profession and as a discipline today. The way it shapes the role of the architect, the figure of the architect. So I was interested in this idea of X, like in X, our money X, exchange, and trying to map what kind of exchanges are taking place through this idea of expertise and consultancy. What is the subject of that expertise? What's the field? What is the kind of authority that is carried by this expertise? And what kind of image or identity it constructs to the consultee? So the consultant and the consultee, is it a symmetrical relation? What is the political economy, if you wish, of that relationship? And we saw yesterday a really interesting range of presentations from the architectural point of view. Sonja from Hanin Lersen showing us the King Abdul Financial District, which is a key project in a strategy that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is developing towards economic diversity in a sort of post-oil or alternative to oil. I have the feeling that it has to do of how to construct a body of knowledge and a certain base after these fleeting consultancies go through what is left behind in the Gulf. And one would have to ask the question, what is left behind and how it has transformed as it gone through. We also had Todd Reis, who, as you probably know, with Rem Koolhaas wrote the 2 volumes of Almanac, probably the only, at least to my knowledge, compendium effort to map this dynamic exchange between the West and the Middle East, consultancy versus money, identity versus opportunity, and how it shapes architecture, whether it is we see the Gulf as a land of opportunity, as image construction, in return constructing an image of a country that wants to appear in a particular way seen by the world. Is it a field of experimentation, or is it architecture as a tool of investment and speculation? There are questions that were raised yesterday. What is the political role of architecture? Can architecture be political within the existing frame, or do we have to find mechanisms to find alternative modes of operation or practice to be able to act politically? These are some of the questions Professor Rabat was asking yesterday. The day started by thanking Abdul and Munira for an incredible job, for achieving something fantastic, for the second row team that support, that worked, and did a fantastic job. We're really proud in the school to have such energy and also vision. Todd Rees promised to steal the name of our of this symposium from Abdul and Munira. I said he was upset that he didn't think about it himself. So that I think is high praise. As I said, the day started recognizing the students' ability, quality, capacity, intelligence, energy, and ended up with Professor Rabat sending them back into a challenge that if any change is going to happen, is going to start with this generation. So I think this is a moment where I would disappear again and do my real job, which is to actually introduce our two speakers today. As you know, SOM is probably the paradigm of a way in which architecture, firm, and practice reshaped itself, both in terms of size and international presence. It has had a presence in the Gulf and worldwide, probably longer than any other big firm. And we're very fortunate and honored to have George Efstathiou. Sorry, I butchered your name. I promise I practiced, but I still couldn't get it. He's a consulting partner of the firm in Chicago. He was for a few years in London developing some of the big projects in Broadgate. He has a very extensive experience in the Middle East and around the world. He was in charge of the Burj Khalifa Tower, the Rolex Tower, the Infinity Tower in Dubai, the Bahrain National Planning Development Strategy, the King Abdul City for Atomic and Renewable Energy, which again is part of these 5 cities that are being built in the kingdom as a way to construct, a cultural, intellectual infrastructure. I could read his many professional associations from every state in the States, to member of the RIBA in England, committees in the University of Illinois, at Chicago, and a number of projects that go from Seoul, South Korea, to Virginia Beach, to Ohio, to Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Cincinnati. I'm just astonished by the list. We're very proud to have him. We'll be followed by Professor Brian Lonsway, our own, the one and only Brian Lonsway, sitting quietly with a bright blue shirt, smiling, wondering what I'm going to say about him. I know better than that. We know each other, so I'm going to read from our SOA page. I thought of this very carefully, so I'd rather say what he has to say about himself, which is Brian Lonsway is an architectural theorist focused on the ways in which built environments materialize evolving cultural values, especially those related to the professionalization and commercialization of design practices. He has done extensive work in the history of commercial design in the United States, from retail to entertainment architecture, within the context of scientific and managerial theories of space. His first book, Making Leisure Work, Architecture and the Experience Economy, documents these historical confluences and explores newly relevant theories of civic agency within consumer-centric landscapes. And I think that's very much frames his response to our guest speaker today. We will be following the presentations with a round table, where we'll be very honored and happy to have Professor Rabat to join us as well. So welcome, and please join me in welcoming. I apologize for the name butchering.
Don't worry about it. Yes. First, I want to thank the school. I thank Abdul and Munira for organizing the event, and the Team X, who I've got to know over the course of the last couple days. And I also made some new friends with Rajwa, Miriam, and also I wouldn't be complete if I didn't say thank you to my guardian for the last 2 days, Nicoletta, who's kept me out of trouble for the most part. So, today I'm going to just give you, this is the more practical side of what it's like to do architecture in the Middle East, and we'll go over a little bit of introduction about SOM in the Middle East, and a little bit of the practice issues that we employ every day in doing the work that we do. SOM has been around for quite some time, over 75 years now, and the SOM was founded with the idea of integrating architecture and engineering. So in our Chicago office, in our firm-wide, we pretty much give a multidisciplinary practice offer to our clients, and we call it one-stop shopping. So we do pretty much anything that on the design side for architecture, planning, and interior design that's needed. We'll also, management is a big part of our discipline as well. And like on Burj Khalifa, we had over 75 different special consultants that were feeding into the design of the project that we manage the input every day. It's like having an orchestra of that many people and trying to decide who goes in, what input we get at one time. We have more than 1,600 national and international design awards, and we're the first firm to ever receive the AIA Firm of the Year award, and the only one to ever win it twice. We have offices around the world, and in the Middle East we have we have one project office that's serving maybe one project in a hospital project, but we choose not to put an office in the Middle East per se, because we found that even some of our competitors put an office there, and it's very difficult to get your best people to move, and it's very expensive as well. So you see some of our other competitors putting second and third tiered people there, and they lose control of some of the quality standards that you have. So we choose, it's a conscious effort to keep our talented people in 3 or 4 major offices in the United States, that being New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, and doing most of the work around the world from there. We do a wide range of building types. I think if you look at history, SOM's been known primarily as an office building architect, but during the course of the last 15 or 20 years, we had to diversify and get involved in other things. So there's a wide range of building types that you see up there that we're involved in. We're particularly known with our tall building experience, and we've got 6 of the 15 world's tallest, and those started primarily in Chicago with Sears Tower and John Hancock. And there's other ones out there being talked about already that are in excess of a kilometer high. So, and Burj Khalifa being about a half-mile high. Our 75-year history shows a tremendous amount of consistency in our design quality. And here you see the graph that shows the AIA Honor Awards that are given nationally every year, and we have a total of 59. Our nearest competitor, Richard Meyer, has 19. And you can see some of the other people the list goes down from there. Also, you also have a large number of 25-year awards. These are projects that stand the test of time. They don't go out of fad. They look as good as they did back 25 years ago. And if you look at the list of the award winners there, you'll see people like Eero Saarinen, Mies van der Rohe, Frank Lloyd Wright, and nobody else in the kind of modern era has that kind of background and performance with respect to design. We try to nurture a culture of innovation. The last couple of years, we've been listed by Fast Company as the most innovative architecture company, and we're in, I think, number 32 in the list of 50 of the top and most innovative companies in the country, and that that includes Microsoft, Google, all the IT type companies. So that was pretty big for us. This little snapshot of what our offices look like in Chicago. Believe me, they look a lot more like your studios do instead of those clean desks. But that was just when we moved in and took some photographs of our LEED silver space. Myself, I just wanted to forget about the the magazine articles, and the Greek magazine called me Mr. Sky because of my involvement with some of the taller buildings, including Burj Khalifa. But my primary function is, and I'm a registered architect, is business development, client liaison on the projects and managing the projects that we do. So I go out and win the work, and I also do the work. You don't separate the two. You really can't. And in 2012, I was named Middle East Architect of the Year by Middle East Architect magazine. Now, SOM in the Middle East, if you look at this timeline, we've been involved in the Middle East since 1954. The first project was airfields in Libya that we were doing for the U.S. government, I believe. But you can see some of the things that have happened a long time. I really wanted to, thinking about the political aspects about what we do, I was wondering what happened during these periods, these periods right in here, where we didn't do work. It would be an interesting kind of study to do, actually. But and then below that are some of the more notable kind of icon buildings that we've done over the course of history, so you can see how they're placed in our history. Our design philosophy is rooted in the international style. I think there's at one time skid moorings in Maryville were called three blind meese, and that's because that's where we got our roots, and it is rooted in structural expression, the integration of architecture and engineering, and of late we've kind of enhanced it to include high performance design. Now, high performance design is not just energy design. It talks about the economics of the building, the efficiencies of the building in terms of performing for our clients. Because most of our clients tend to be developers, and their returns are important. Planning principles pretty much worldwide remain the same, but the key things that we are looking at in a lot of the planning work that we do in the Middle East is creating walkable places. People don't walk that much because of the heat, and that's a very difficult thing to achieve, I think. And also transit systems, public transportation. It's really not in the Arab culture to get into a bus or a train as we might do. It's a very car-oriented society. Some of the projects that we've been involved in and these first two are very important ones in our history in Saudi, and if you, I think this one actually won the Aga Khan Award at one time. But these were, as you look at them, they're great designs and everything, but they're also precursors and really acknowledge the climate and the context more than anybody would think when they first look at them. Here the natural ventilation through these tents really help cool the space under the tents for the people that are coming for Hajj. And National Commercial Bank in Jeddah as well really has it more inward facing and most of the glass shaded by in the atrium space. Burj Khalifa goes without saying. This has been a career project for me. We started in 2003 with a design competition and finished it, was inaugurated in 2010. We're still working on it today and in tweaking certain aspects of the ground. Rolex Tower was a very interesting project, and along Sheikh Zayed Road, the sites are very small. And the partie is that there's a building on Sheikh Zayed Road, and there's parking in the back. Not the greatest for having an area to grow. But it was a great client, and in fact, Abdullah Yabruti, who's a good friend of mine in Dubai, is an alum of Syracuse Engineering School, and also is a big benefactor in the school. So I told him I was coming, and I told him to root for Syracuse last Saturday, but it didn't work. I was rooting for Syracuse too. It would have been a fun night last night. And Infinity Tower is the third one that rounds out the three. We almost got them one right after the other when I first went to Dubai in 2003. What happened? Something went out. Oh, there it is. Okay. I just can't see it here. Okay. I'll go back. I think this we think it's the first twisting tower ever built because the structure actually twists. Others have an appendage on the outside of a building that marches around a tower that gives it the twisted effect. But this is more of an engineering feat than an architectural one. And it was very difficult. It was an expensive structure. I don't think you'll see too many of those being done again, and certainly we probably won't do it again either. And Al Hamra Tower in Kuwait City, which has been receiving a lot of accolades lately. This was done by our New York office. We also do a large amount of planning, and one of those economic cities in Saudi is King Abdullah Economic City, which is just north of Jeddah on the Red Sea. We started the master plan of that about 5 or 6 years ago, and then we're continuing to do work now and change it because they made some early mistakes by going to another planner, and then it came back to us to kind of fix those and get it back on track again. So it looks like that's going forward. We also worked with the Kingdom of Bahrain in doing the National Development Strategy for 2030, and this was great because we were meeting with the Crown Prince on a monthly basis and discussing kind of the future of the country. I mean, he was very open behind closed doors, not in an open session, about how he saw the country going forward. And it was an honor to meet him. And I knew it was going to be a comfortable kind of meeting when the first thing he said to me was, "How the cubby's doing?" So, I thought it was pretty good, pretty cool. King Abdullah Economic City for Atomic and Renewable Energy was a recent project, but it's going on with another architect. This was a planning competition where 14 teams were brought in. 14 is a lot. Paid full fee to come up with ideas for a city that focuses on atomic and renewable energy outside of Riyadh. It was almost a year process of work. It was supposed to be a public exhibition in Riyadh, but it never. They set it all up, but the king never went to see it, so it just sat there. A lot of money was spent on that project, but we're seeing it going forward with one of our competitors now. And Alexandria Waterfront is a project that we did with the EMAR to revitalize the waterfront there and bring back some of the history of the old waterfront. And actually this won an AIA award as well, but it pretty much stopped because of some political issues in the city. So the AE practice issues, and some of these are hopefully are going to be kind of interesting. I try to make them not so boring, but we'll see how it goes. The definition of the middle of this market, we've kind of divided the world into larger chunks for marketing purposes and reporting purposes. And this is the MENA, Middle East and North Africa region, where the Middle East actually sits. Most of the work, though, is really centered around the Gulf in the major cities like Dubai, Doha, Bahrain, and Jeddah and Riyadh. It's very difficult to get work in North Africa, and certainly a lot of things have happened in Syria and Libya lately that kind of kept us away from going there of late. We're starting to work in Oman now, doing a large plan for a new city called Al Duqm, and I'm doing a couple of projects both in Hyatt hotel projects in Saudi. So whenever I do a presentation, you guys might know a little bit more about the geography, but I do kind of like a geography 101, so that people understand where the Middle East is. And you heard a lot of in the video, and what it takes to get there. And the trip from Chicago is usually done through transferring through Europe or direct flights now from direct Chicago to Abu Dhabi on Etihad, or Qatar Airways just announced one last week, actually this week, going direct from Chicago to Doha, which should make life easy. The only problem is they're not part of the Star Alliance, so it makes it difficult for us to use them. In terms of doing work there, it's kind of interesting to know that the work weeks don't coincide. And we have, in Saudi we have 3 days of overlap, and in the rest of the Middle East it's maybe 4 days. And that puts a lot of pressure on us to really communicate in those 2 or 3 days. The other more serious pressure is on a daily basis, where the time zones don't align. So you can see the top line here is I call it the U.S. line, but usually that expands our, if you say the workday is from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, We're starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even 7 with a conference call. And on the other end of that is that I'm usually up late at night on the phone before I go to bed, just to have overlap with our clients' days on both sides. So this really kind of, along with a BlackBerry and computer, really extends your work hours to more like 24/7. These are not meant to be good examples, but they're examples of what people think are decent buildings there. So when I say design opportunities, we find the competition of the buildings that are there and the buildings that are being proposed to be very easy for us to compete against. These are not considered to be best, and we talk about the pluses and minuses of all of them. But as we sell ourselves in the Middle East, the marketing keys for us are we have a very strong brand recognition. And if some of the talks yesterday, you talked about Todd talked about a checklist of, I have the best car, I have the biggest house, I have the nicest vacation home. We like to think that we're the best architect to choose on that checklist, and that does help quite a bit. The brand SOM is known worldwide. We have 60 years of experience in MENA. We have the multidisciplinary services. We're one-stop shopping for our clients, and a lot of our clients don't have the experience in development, so we end up kind of teaching them how to do it. And we're pretty adept at doing that. We have strong relationships with key developers in the region, and have a consistent and high level of design awards given. And given that the buildings that were actually built in a short period of time in the last 10 years, we have a very strong track record. Most of the client types are the same client types that you'd see practically everywhere around the world. Going back, this is one really fed by sovereign wealth funds, which we see a lot more of those in the Middle East than anywhere else. The project types that we get invited to are a wide range of things that you see there. This mixed use category is the biggest one. People come to us when they're the most complicated projects for us to do, where there's 3 or 4 uses at one time that have to be integrated in one project. So that mixed use category really could be a combination of usually is hospitality, residential, and retail. And all the parking that goes along with it, which is quite huge in the Middle East. And there's a smattering of all these other little things here and there. Hospitality would be the second biggest one, I think. We're doing a lot of work for Four Seasons, Hyatt, and a couple other big chains in the Middle East now. We think that one's going to be a pretty strong one. So the hospitality side, the hotel side, is really an opportunity to do not just the building architecture, but the interiors at the same time, and trying to get those two talking together in one building makes a pretty successful project. One of the phenomena that we've seen over the last 10 years is the fact that the Middle East didn't only just draw architects, it drew other developers from other places, especially the U.S., where there's not much going on. There's still not much going on. So you see some fairly big names there at the bottom that have ventured into the Middle East and created partnerships and actually set up offices there. And on the other side of that, you've seen a lot of the Middle Eastern money going everywhere else in the world for investment. A big place right now for some of my clients is Southeast Asia, where I'm also active quite a bit. So in getting the work that we do, we get them through design commissions, direct commissions, design competitions, which we don't like to do unless we're paid for them. There's a lot of people that expect to get free ideas from the profession, and I know a lot of the bigger firms refuse to do any that are not paid. And a lot of it is kind of almost a knee-jerk reaction to the request for proposal coming out of the Middle East, and there's quite a few from not only from a developer side, a private side, but the institutional and governmental side. And then the biggest one way is through repeat clients. If you have a happy client, you don't have to spend any money on marketing to get the next project, as long as you've done a good job and maintain a strong relationship, which in the Middle East, relationships with people are really on top of the list of priorities as we venture into the region. I put this one in just for a kind of interesting slide as to the Burj Khalifa competition, which this was the first submission, which looks similar. The idea is similar, but it really doesn't look like the building and the 5 other competition entries that were there. Just a kind of an interesting side note. That was a 2-week design competition, by the way, and it was paid like $15,000 or something like that. Just a small token. Now, some of these next couple slides will show the differences between how we're used to delivering our services in the U.S. or in North America versus the Middle East or even Europe to a point. In the U.S., we get a lot more. We seem to have a lot more time to think about what we're doing, do a lot more comprehensive drawing before we have a set of drawings that go for construction. And as a result of that, our field staff requirements are quite small. Like, let's take a 1 million square foot building, could be done with 2 people if the client wanted to pay for it in the field. And there's usually a supporting staff that's in the office. But on the other side, we found that in the Middle East, the local consultants and even some of the international consultants who've set up shop there do a lot less drawing. They do it fast and they do it cheaper. I mean, but that means that on the other side of that, the tradition is during construction, you could have a team of 50 architects and engineers sitting on the site, responding to questions from a contractor that weren't on the drawings in the first place. So we'd rather leave that. We'd rather do a lot more drawing and have that think time up front, get the project documented, so it's not left up to anybody else as we build the building. Execution of the building is just as important as the design. But for the most part, a lot of our work, due to economic reasons, our fees tend to be higher in the Middle East because, I'm not, when I say we, I'm talking about U.S.-based large architecture firms, tend to be higher. Cost basis is higher. Architects get paid a lot more money here than they do in the Middle East. Architects here are doing all the work from beginning of concept through the design phases, where in the Middle East they use more draftsmen, unskilled, uneducated draftsmen to really document these drawings, the building. So as a result of those fees, we're put ourselves in a situation where we're only going through design development only. And that's the minimum that we will do. Other architects have backed off to schematic, but you really leave a lot up to someone else's interpretation of what your design intent was if you do that. And then during the CDs, we usually check the drawings 2 or 3 times, and then during construction, we're there on call for any questions that might be asked. So some of the issues that are more difficult to deal with in the Middle East than we have here is that there's low local fee structures or fee structures from satellite offices where the cost is less and they do less. So we're fighting that battle constantly. Architecture is a commodity. When I first went there, it was like talking to clients or potential clients, and they didn't understand that each architect is different. And you can't it's not like buying a Volkswagen from one dealer to another. It's really, architects are different, and you almost get what you pay for. So this is a constant struggle and a constant discussion as we go forward. There's a lot of, you heard Todd talk about a lot of the infrastructure work that was done in the Middle East in the early 60s. And right now we see the vestiges of these contracts that were basically FIDIC contracts, where these are consulting engineer contracts, kind of left over and in professional service contracts that you wouldn't normally see in contracts in other places around the world. They're very onerous provisions like bonds and liquidated damages and things like that really are not insurable by our insurance companies. And also you see them more in construction contracts. So we have to fight those battles all the time. Sometimes we don't win, but those are issues that we're not used to dealing with. And then the real issue is the value of good design. Really, we have to spend a lot of time and energy communicating the value of that design in terms of the final end product, and the time that it takes, and the fee that it takes to do a good project. So I think that was it.
Comprehensive. Can I ask you, when you go back home, to share with me the slide where you have
So this is a good transition between images here on the Burj. So the small, big building here. So I was asked to give a kind of a response to not just George today, but also in a way to a bit of the event for the last 2 days in preparation for the roundtable discussion that Francisco Sanin will be coordinating, moderating, hosting. And so putting some thoughts together, really reflecting on yesterday's talks, having an advanced copy of George's presentation, wanting to frame some issues, what I would say are really about what George just presented as his penultimate slide. What is the kind of architecture of the Gulf, not from an aesthetic perspective, not from a qualitative or evaluative construction perspective, but fundamentally, what is the subject of our discipline when operating in that context? And so, starting with the Burj, of course, is a great place to start because we all know it so well. It's such an iconic building. I must say, probably one of the most well-crafted pieces of architecture I've seen in my life. When I was there, it's impeccable at every level. And that extends through so much of the work in the Gulf, where the relationship between the extremity and the complexity of the projects and its actual material execution for these more stellar projects is remarkable, and I think really a testament to what a certain kind of agency of architecture can be. What I'm interested in sort of looking at, though, is, again, not these as built artifacts per se, but in that they are built artifacts, so then what, right? What does it mean that those things are made? Now that they are made, what do we do with them? How do we understand them? How do we talk about them? And ultimately, how do they resonate with our discipline, both professionally and intellectually? So, looking at, on one hand, the elegance of a building like the Burj, on the other hand, its hyperbole. This is, as you go through the, $100 kind of trip to the top, you're exposed to a whole bunch of infographics, and this is one of them that, produces this image, this rhetoric about the building, which, far exceeds anything any architecture firm could ever do. So when you're at the top, and whether you're at the top as me, or you're at the top as Tom Cruise, what do you actually see when you're at the top of this building? What are you looking down at? What is the kind of architectural context which this building sits? And so most of us know it's this, right? There's a lot of that, which is just the white sands of the desert, unbuilt, either unbuilt because it's still state-owned land for which there's no development contract, or state-owned land that has been given to a state developer, or privately owned land for either individual development or kind of free zone development. But in addition to this empty space that we sort of know so well about, we hear as a kind of rhetoric of sort of coming from nothing, as Todd was pointing out yesterday. We also see a fair bit of this. And what struck me about being on the 120th floor of this building is looking out and not feeling like I was on the 120th floor of a building, because so much of the surrounding context is 80, 90 stories. And so when you're looking out from the 120th floor of a building, you're looking out over a landscape that is a landscape of this kind of incessant spectacularity of architecture. And for me, driving, this is Sheikh Zayed Road here, this major thoroughfare here, looking at something like this, and you realize, like, okay, what I'm looking at basically is the entire high-rise production of a single American major city. So that would be like downtown Chicago in terms of its high-rises. And this is just one small part of the strip. We also, when we look down at this, and this is what I like to spend a lot of my time talking about, is this development and another as foils for thinking through the architectural project. What I'm looking at here is downtown Dubai, trademark, downtown Dubai. Not actually what we would think of as downtown Dubai, but downtown Dubai. Downtown Dubai is apparently also the center of now. It is a rhetorical campaign to position architecture, the Burj is in downtown Dubai, to position architecture as an agent of global enterprise, financial leverage and financial acumen, and also kind of media spectacle. And so architecture is there so that I can actually rent a room at the hotel, or I can live in one of those actually very small, how small are the stories at the top? How many square feet? Yeah. 5,000 square feet. I mean, it's tiny up there, right? You know, so I can live in one of those tiny little multi-story apartments, or get a drink on 128, or look out at 120. It exists as a building for occupation, but it also exists as a building for all of this other, all these other criteria. Downtown Dubai is a fascinating development, and it is by Emaar, you've heard. What I want to do in talking about real estate development for a little bit is to position some of the things that are very different than our models for real estate development here. Typically in Dubai, one of three things happen when a project is about to be developed. Either it's state-owned land, and state-owned land is then just given to basically a state-owned development agency. So it's a kind of a weird sort of a shuffle of land whereby the state, and in manifest by the sheikh, gives land to another member of the sheikh's family for what is ultimately what we would call a public development. Land can also be set aside as a free development zone, and free development zones, I can't even begin to try to describe their complexity today, but a free development zone basically means, it's sort of like Vatican City a little bit, right? It's not actually part of Dubai, really. It applies to the legal system of Dubai, applies moderately to it, yet the kind of financial transactions, the kind of real estate development, the kind of ownership of land, and the kind of regulation that land ownership actually creates for the occupation that can happen there is very different. And thirdly, land can literally be sold to a private developer, and often those private developers are somewhere between state-owned and not state-owned. They're these kind of hybrid developments. And what's interesting are either the state-owned developments or the hybrid, or state-owned developers or the hybrid developers are the ones that are really producing these incredibly spectacular projects because they have the state agency behind them. They have the sheikh pushing to construct this image of Dubai that we're all familiar with. Downtown Dubai is one in that kind of somewhat hybrid fashion. Emaar is not directly in the sheikh's, the royal family rather, but it is a cousin relationship. And so the land was somewhat purchased, somewhat given to Sheikh Mohammed Mohammed Ali Adabar, the chairman, as he likes to be called, of Emaar Development. Downtown Dubai is a large project that has at its center a piece of architecture, right? And this is the piece of architecture that we know about most commonly in there. But it consists of many others as well. So not only does that one development have the world's tallest building, it also has the world's largest shopping mall. It has the world's largest fountain. And all within an area that is, kind of large. You'll see in a second how large this really is, but isn't quite outrageously large, but tries to position itself kind of rhetorically, I think, and this is really important, as the downtown, as the center of now for the new Dubai. The old downtown of the old Dubai, as it were, which implicitly was created by this thing called the new downtown Dubai, is about 5-10 miles up the road, not very far. This is the mall here that I was referring to. This is the largest mall in the world. And the reason I was actually in Dubai to study this building. It's about 12.5 million square feet. This is, right here is the footprint, as you might be able to recognize, of the Burj Khalifa. And downtown Dubai runs this entire perimeter. So it includes quite a substantive amount of architectural development. It includes about 80 high-rise buildings, or at least in its full master plan. It has an area here called the Old Town, part of which is shopping and part of which is residential. And this is the kind of high-rise development, which, as you can see, just kind of barely started here. It also contains Emaar's headquarters, and then a number of small commercial spaces kind of surrounding the mall. To put in a bit of context for you, this is that same footprint in downtown Syracuse at the same scale. So you can see it's pretty much what we're used to as kind of downtown Syracuse. But what I want to point out, and what I think is really interesting about this kind of development, which is really unheard of here, is I would make an argument that this development is seen actually like a plot of land in the same way that a blank plot of land for a single piece of architecture is conceived. It is a site for a single project by a single developer, even if multiple architects are involved, and positioned simultaneously as city and as body of architecture. The significance of this, the substance of this, it really begins to resonate when you look at things at the larger scale of Dubai's development. So again, here's the downtown Dubai development, and I'll show you the context of this in Dubai itself. So that's there, right? And you recognize the palms. And what I want to do is take you from that space, which is downtown Dubai, overall, I think 20 million square foot in footprint, to this site down here, which is, as far as I know, the largest single constrained project site in the world. It's 3 billion square feet as a single project. Now, this one is by the same kind of crazy developers as these things. It's a relationship. It's a project called Dubai World. It's not ever really going to be fully realized. They were expecting 25 million people to live there just in this one area. So it has all the rhetoric of these really spectacular projects. But what's fascinating about them is this kind of notion of their singularity of definition, the fact that they are seen as the construction of an entire city landscape, as we saw in that video for downtown Dubai, from kind of waking up to going to sleep. You can live, you can work, you can shop, you can eat. These are autonomous cities, but they are autonomous cities by single developers, right? What I want to do before I go into a little bit of a kind of meandering through the Dubaian architecture that you don't often see to put these things in context, is also to talk a little bit about the question of rights and the construct of terms that we're used to thinking about, like public space, public life, private space, private ownership. In Dubai, in particular, it has about just over 2 million residents in Dubai. But only about 17% of those are native Emirati. Now, the constitutional monarchy of Dubai does afford a Bill of Rights very similar to ours. There are many shared rights. There's a right to free speech that apply to the native residents, the Emirati. Now, of course, there are gender privilegings that happen within that Bill of Rights and how they're applied. And so it's a lot more open than you would think, but again, it applies only to that 400,000 people that are the native populace. If you're in the other 1.7 million expatriates, and this includes some of the laborers, but very few because they're mostly undocumented, you have no rights whatsoever. For any reason, the government of the UAE or the government of Dubai can extradite you. So you're there totally at the whim of the state agency and the relationship of that state agency to whatever kind of landowner you happen to be working with. That's a little different in the free enterprise zones, but so whether you're looking at a city, which is the old city of Dubai, which is just kind of like, well, this whole area, but the downtown is just on the other side of the canal there, the new downtown Dubai, or something kind of absolutely crazy like this, you're looking at one of these constructs that is positioned as a kind of public urban project. And it is public by their very definition, but the public for whom it really serves is a very small fraction of the public. And so you get these fascinating complexities of what it actually means to live in a city as an expat. Now again, this is in context for those of you Syracusans here. So this is 3 billion square feet. This is the city of Syracuse. This is Onondaga Lake. So, I mean, that one development is conceived to be something of that magnitude. Now, what it actually is basically a visitor center and a few residential developments that have been completed. So you can see the 2.5 million that they're looking at eventually populating. But really what it is the Dubai we're very familiar with. It's this. It's a lot of that. And it's a ginormous model, about the size of this room that we're in right now. that is the model for Dubai Land. And so it's kind of part theme park, right? There are these kind of themed environments. There's a Tiger Woods golf course and residential development, which is up here. There's a kind of buried city under the sands here. And so they just kind of went crazy with the kind of themed understanding of what the architectural production might be. Now, of course, Dubai does also have a lot of this. So this is the, so let's say one of the original souks. This is in the old, not the original historic downtown, but the old downtown of Dubai. So you have the traditional souk, which is highly functional today. I didn't happen to go there and take these photos on the day it was open, but these are all spice vendors, which is a really kind of fantastic trading post. You have the new repops of the old. This is souk Jumeirah. You have a tremendous amount of this, and so the largest body of architecture in Dubai, I would argue, is this, not by square foot, but by land coverage. This kind of mid-century to late century, sort of somewhat banal but very expensive residential architecture. You get this kind of strange mishmash of ill-conceived urban space through the heyday of the 70s and 80s architectural development boom. You have a fantastic alternative art scene that exists in various little factors throughout the city. You have fantastic, really, really fresh markets here next to the abattoir. You have single-family Cape Cod-style homes. You have, of course, the spectacular indoor ski slope of Dubai. And then you also have this Dubai, of course, right? So and that's, if we move from the old Dubai to the new, we end up with these, you know, sort of roads that lead nowhere. Big empty sites in the middle of the city, buildings that are actually not state approved for occupancy, but have since become occupied primarily by laborers and those in the lower financial classes. This from a huge development called International City. This is Italy, you can see. But what is really interesting when we return to these major developments is, again, this idea of the constitution of architecture. So this is downtown Dubai on the ground. That is the souk that's part of old Dubai over there. This is the height of the major office park of it. And as we come around here, I'm standing right in front of the Burj Khalifa right here. You can see the beginnings of it. And so on the ground, we have in these new developments an effort to construct a notion of participation, of publicness, of a gesture to a public that actually, ironically, doesn't exist in that historical Dubai because it's of a political model which is very foreign to that historical Dubai. The kind of public space, actually, that space right here, so I was standing on the other side of the fountain here, is the space that Todd spoke about yesterday. And it is quite a spectacular fountain. It's about 45-story tall jets of water. But it does actually serve every day, on a daily basis, as an aggregate for a public that really didn't exist in Dubai prior to this. There were one or two other kind of historically important civic spaces, and yet we have a Western model of a public space operating here. What I want to talk about, though, in these is the constitution of identification of architecture and of real estate development within this larger model. So what really happens here is in these developments, you can see here this is a standard street and an EMAR development. These are all kind of EMAR signage. To one of the palms, so this is the palm, this is the main kind of stem of the palm, the fronds of the palm. So whether sort of very richly and elegantly occupied, so these are multi-million-dollar homes. These are the ones with all the beachfront property right behind them. Or unoccupied buildings. In this case, we have a project that has seen tremendous, it was half in construction right when the financial downturn happened. So most of these buildings remain problematically occupied. And what I mean by that is they're either vacant or half vacant, or they aren't up to the snuff of what they were promised to the tenants, and they're kind of sitting in this weird zone waiting for some sort of financial regulation. But whether these projects are inhabited, uninhabited, whether they are kind of in an old style or a new style, whether they're spectacular or banal, what we begin to see is that architecture really is a function of capital investment. It's a function of media enterprise across a global scale, and it's a function of construction of intervention in space for the everyday resident in a way that is historically quite new. It's an importation of Western models of civic identification, of publicness, in a way that is very foreign to the city and part of the problem of its contestation. If we take a place like this, and this is a place called Festival City, what we understand in this architecture is that these buildings exist, as I said, part for occupation, but they exist on a global plane that is also partly for financial investment. Many of these buildings remain unoccupied because that was actually part of their plan. They are improvements to the land. And in improvements to the land, they introduce a real estate investment opportunity that is much greater than, kind of a vacant site. And so in creating leasable space, in creating the global spectacular idea of investment opportunity and having an office abroad or a residence abroad in Dubai for the expats, one creates a financial model of investment based on derivatives that doesn't actually matter or doesn't actually care if the building is ultimately occupied in the end. And that is part what led to the major financial downturn. That buildings are built, architecture is constructed, it's absolutely necessary for this financial investment. It's absolutely necessary for the global media spectacle, but it actually isn't there for occupation, right? So what does that say about our discipline? Where does that position the project of architecture when in fact architecture is seen as, in this case the way I'm talking about it right now, an investment tool? So to wrap up, what for me is most significant to the thinking about architecture is what ultimately I think is a pretty simple observation. But that's the subject of our discipline really exists no longer in the material body of the building itself, but in a user experience of what I call a much larger contingency of design effects. You become subsumed in these larger kind of global brand narratives because of the use of these environments, whether you're a resident kind of partaking in this new kind of hybrid public-private space that never existed historically in the city, via financial transaction because you're a foreign investor investing in a building and making profit off a building that never will have any residents or tenants in it whatsoever, or whether just kind of imaginarily, like most of us inhabited Dubai or inhabit Dubai, through this kind of spectacle of the media image, the spectacle of what these buildings are, even if we never really need to go. And so for me, this, I argue, is the project of architecture that all but those really kind of on the ground, in the know, operating in a context like this, see as the transformative potential of a new kind of architecture. So for me, I see these as opportunities for architectural production. I see the leverage, the scale of investment, the scale of land consumption and real estate opportunities, something like downtown Dubai, as novel places for architecture to go, right? We can look at the buildings themselves and find that they're kind of banal. We can look at them and say, oh my God, that's spectacular. It used so many resources, I never would want to even begin to think about practicing like that as an architect. But we can see them as our opportunities to think about our practice differently. And that's where I'd like to leave you in relationship to this symposium. Thank you. Happened there. Good. Now it is. Excuse me. I have 3 pieces of writing on it. Yeah, but this is a kind of combination of them.
Of course.
Yeah.
Not an easy task to be the moderator today. I think the format that was chosen by the organizers yesterday and today, pairing practicing architect and an academic who practices probably in a different way. I think we were talking over dinner yesterday about the idea of what new forms of practice can emerge. And I think Professor Rabat was talking about a symposium he's organizing 10 days where he's gathering together a number of practicing architects that are trying to define new forms of funding that would allow the architects to define a different agenda that is not necessarily that which has traditionally been given to architecture to be an expression or a service provider to an image maker, and speculator, or a power display. I'm quoting freely from his speech. Brian Lonsway very convincingly, I think, showed us that architecture is far from being the art of habitation anymore. It is as much image consumption and mechanism for speculation as anything else. And he stopped right where I would have wanted him to start, which is, what does it mean for architecture? You know, what kind of practices, opportunities it does. And I framed that within a very convincing and I think very professional presentation by George. I was ready to call SOM to do my next project. Really convincing, but also I think very useful in trying to understand what are the issues that when you do the kind of job talk that the client would actually expect you to do. You know, you need to show that you're reliable, that you have a track record, that you're able, and that you can provide something. Part of what I think this symposium has been about is why the client, or the consultee, as I like to call it, requires those services, and what are the expectations that are to be fulfilled. And I think some clues were given here and there, where we see that an architectural firm can actually brand a whole country. You know, the idea that SOM can actually design or plan the national strategy for Bahrain, was it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is an incredible moment, and it's not very different from the kind of role of architecture branding through image the countries of the Gulf. There is a clear, I mean, there is a sort of interesting economy, political economy, between the need of a big firm in the US or in Europe in order to survive economically, to, in a way, move its services to places where the money and the product are, and the need of those countries to project an image that makes them relevant, or in a particular way. That some of the things I would like to explore, why and in what way they are so. And finally, you know, there is all that other part, invisible part. You know, we normally refer in the West as minorities, but in this case they are the majority, the migrant workers, the invisible actors of this drama that often are displayed from parts of the city to construct these big developments. They are by now, as Todd was saying, you know, their fate in a way challenges our own preconceptions. So when human rights begins to write about or call attention worldwide to their plea, well, the result is the opposite effect. They are actually moved away, farther away from the city, put in a much more enclosed landscape. So there's a bit of that other side of reading architecture, which is actually the inhabited one, and where space actually is as an element of control, and so forth. So I would love to set up a dialogue between George and Brian, but I would actually prefer to ask Professor Rabat to for his comments, and then open up the discussion.
You're putting me on the spot, but that's fine. I actually would like to make my comments very short, because I would like to hear from you. Brian blew up what I was supposed to be doing in 10 days in the scale of what he is proposing to be what architects could do with some of the new functions that architecture is offering us. None of it is beautiful. So since we have the suggestion of actually, why did you stop there? Why didn't you push it a little bit further? It seems to me that he probably has a Blade Runner vision of it, of what would happen from the point where he stopped. And I'm going to give you an example. What would we do with all of these buildings in Dubai? What is this architecture offering us as architects to do? I had a student a couple of years ago at MIT who basically proposed immediately after the financial crash to go and look at the stock of building in Dubai and to suggest what to do with it. There were 910 towers in Dubai, either under construction or fully constructed or projected to be constructed, that were affected by this financial crash. So he went there, and as a designer, he started thinking about what can we do? Remodeling, reuse, rethinking what the tower is supposed to be. For example, towers that are not to be at all occupied, he turned them into billboards. And he started using LED new lighting on them. And that's basically what architecture that Brian has shown us is starting to do, which is basically a branding of a product that is larger than the architecture itself. In that case, he basically responded by saying, we'll make it physically exactly where it's claiming to be. The notion of actually reclaiming some of this architecture to what it claimed to be in the beginning, housing for people who cannot afford houses in Dubai. We didn't see some of the worst neighborhoods in Dubai where the majority of the inhabitants of Dubai are actually stacked up or are squeezed 6 or 7 to a room. Perhaps actually some of these towers that are empty could be repossessed and basically open to these individuals that are living there, that are making Dubai where it is, and perhaps providing a little bit more social fairness. But I'm actually thinking of what can we do with it when it is commodified to the level of what you presented us with in here. And what do you think the role of the architect could be, as opposed to the role of either the politician or the financier or the developer, entrepreneur, investor, and so on? And just as a derivative to that question, I am extremely intrigued by your comment on Western public spaces being planted in spaces that, or in places that are not used to it. Of course, actually, Western public spaces also are unfamiliar to Western people. You learn how to use your public space. It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that is cultural. It's not something that distinguishes one people from the other. You are taught civics, I hope. I hope all of you have taken civics in some class at some point. And you are taught what are your rights and what are your duties. So what is missing, and here perhaps I'm starting to sound a little bit too repetitive, but what is missing in that discussion is not the role of architecture, but the role of politics in these cities that we are looking at. So I would like to challenge Brian to try to answer the question about those public spaces from the missing civics, from the missing political rights of the individuals in Dubai, so that what we are left with is exactly what Brian showed us, is the spectacle of public spaces. You have individuals standing there and watching this fabulous fountain that we've been hearing about, but they actually do not form a public, except a public in the sense of a Broadway public, like you are there to watch something, but you are not there to take part in something. And those are the failures of the public spaces, in which they are not offering you the opportunity of appropriating and taking part of the space, but they are bringing you to the space to basically project an image of a public space. You're there standing as if you are doing something, but all you're doing is you're watching. I don't know how many of you remember the Peter Sellers' last film. Any of you remember this? He was called Mr. Gardner. And when someone is trying to seduce him, she says, "What do you want?" The someone was Shirley MacLaine. And he responds to her, "I like to watch." Basically, what people in Dubai do is watch. They just don't do anything that is politically valuable in these spaces that we are looking at. So perhaps that I will leave that comment to you. And if I can go back to George's presentation and just comment a little bit on not the efficiency. All of us were convinced, and indeed, actually, I would do the exact same thing. If I were to be a developer, SOM would be the first address that I would go to. And now that I have his business card, I probably would alert him early on that I have a client for you. But yesterday, you challenged me after I said architects are service providers. But today, you somehow sort of like proved it majestically, that this is basically what SOM is. And I would like you to tell me if I'm wrong in reading it as such.
I think I'm here. No, we are a service provider. We're a professional services firm, and there's no hiding that at all. where the profession of architecture, as we do it every day, is a business, and we're in it to make money so that we can continue to do good buildings around the world as objects. We're not going to be political advocates or activists, and that was never part of our game plan. So I'm not making an excuse for not being politically connected, but that's not part of our mission.
You are politically connected. You're just not politically active.
That's right.
Okay, I think we're going to open it to the public. I just wanted to make one comment. When Brian showed Dubai Land model, I thought you were showing Destiny USA. I just wanted to bring it home. I think the here and there, the us and the other somehow conflate each other. But there's a question by...
Let me just make one comment about Dubai Land now that you brought it back. I taught a class on Dubai some 7 or 8 years ago. I took the students there, and we were taking to the exact same model.
Yeah.
But the PR person that was presenting the model to us would look at us. We were a bunch of like 15 people from MIT, and he would say, how many Eiffel Tower are there in the world? And of course, the obvious answer, you have to say 1. And he would go, we will have 4 in Dubai Land. How many Taj Mahal are there in the world? And we will say 1, of course, in Agra. And he would go, we will have 5 of them in Dubai Land. And he will point them on that model. They were sort of like spread all over.
That's a great story.
Yeah, I wanted to thank both of you for your presentations today. One of the things I really appreciated is that in different ways, both of them highlighted the fact that we often misrecognize the nature of architectural work and architectural practice, and in fact that there's a whole sector of the architectural economy that doesn't map at all onto the conventional understandings we have of how architects operate and what their agency is in the world. And so it seems to me that there's that this is in some ways a question of scale, that SOM operates at a scale that demands a different set of interpretive criteria than some of the smaller firms that we're used to comparing it to and to understanding ourselves through. And it's much more like part of a development of a new modality of practice in the 20th century that I would trace back to the beginning of the century with architects, with Ove Arup, or with Albert Kahn Associates, which some students here and I are starting to research in partnership with people at University of Michigan, where Albert Kahn, the firm, has done something like 1,900 commissions just in the lifetime of its founding partner, which ended in 1942, including more than 500 factories in the Soviet Union in a 3-year period from 1929 to 1932. In a sense, Albert Kahn Associates built Stalin's first 5-year plan. I mean, and so there's a point at which with Arup, with Kahn, with also SOM, also firms like Halliburton, we need to understand that their primary purpose is to shape the economy. That, as Brian highlighted, that the buildings in a sense are incidental. The criteria we're used to judging them by as good buildings or good design is maybe only a secondary component of their role at a macroeconomic level in shaping economies. And so congratulations to the two of you and to the student organizers for posing us this challenge.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. I'm thinking of that, and I'm certainly thinking of your provocation as well about civics. I think for me the opportunity to go there was serendipitous in a way. My work is about these kind of architectural constructions, and then having the opportunity to look at one of these, what I would consider a kind of architectural provocation. Like, anytime you do the biggest of something, it's trying to provoke the edges of our discipline. And so the world that I described today was completely foreign to me upon setting foot in Dubai. And so I had that great kind of outsider opportunity to see how what I would see there on the ground matched any of the kind of collective imaginary that I brought to it, right? And so those discoveries take place within that kind of half imagined and half real space. And so I understood Dubai. I knew Dubai well, right? Through, as an architect, certainly through the architectural project that had already made it here in literature and discussion. But then going there and you see them, that immediately was what raised this question of what is the architecture that's here, right? I had seen the buildings. I knew what they were. I had a checklist of some I wanted to see. But seeing them wasn't the spectacular part. Seeing them wasn't actually interesting. Like, you could look at them, you could enjoy them, but as you said, Jonathan, their incidental nature was such that it's like, well, yeah. So I've seen this building. What am I seeing? Am I seeing that body of architecture, or am I seeing that larger thing through that lens of the body of architecture? And I think in a place like Dubai, and maybe it's my filter, but I think that happens in one and the same place. Right? I don't think you can go to any of those buildings, especially the more banal ones, and see them as anything but those mechanisms that you just described so well.
I just wanted to follow up because one of the things, there's an expression that Todd Rees used yesterday, and he talks about the architecturalization of space. And what he meant by that is that architecture is used to create the urbane as opposed to the urban. You know, like what the role of architecture in this case is to not only marginal, but actually central to actually undoing a notion of public space and public realm. So it's not simply that it doesn't correspond to whatever, but it actually fragments and deconstructs, so to speak, the notion of public space by creating the appearance of public space. So it's a much more pervasive as opposed to secondary public space. And one of the questions we've been trying to figure out is, within the constraints of architecture, what is the kind of body of knowledge that allows us then to operate? Is there a space when architects, given a particular condition, can actually begin to produce tools, design, or thoughts? You know, and here we begin to make the distinction between profession and discipline, where that idea of the publicness and the urbane and the political can be infused into the projects. I think that's a question for you, George.
Oh, great. What was the question again?
I don't know. I can't remember.
No, I'm not sure how to answer that, because I was kind of thinking of a question to ask Brian in a minute. But
okay, go ahead.
But you know, one thing we're talking about some details around buildings or the spaces between them, and how people relate to them. But if we use Dubai as a point to study. The issues in Dubai that I saw, you know, back in 2003 it was something that Rabat said yesterday. Where's the plan? There really is no plan. And your perceptions about these, I always call them island development. Here's downtown Burj Dubai. Here's Dubai land. Here's something else, frontier land. Here's, you know, but those are all separate, and nothing links the city together. And you talk about reuse of buildings. But reuse them for what? There's nobody there, and you can't grow a city just by building buildings. There's got to be a real reason for the city to grow, and it has to have some heart that pumps blood into these veins that make it grow. And until they establish a reason to be in Dubai by the first thing is you've got to get professional service firms in there, big companies in there, so that there's places for people to work. And then there's places that people live. Right now, they've built places for people to live and go to mosque or go to the Eiffel Tower, but there's no work. There's nothing to be done there. So until you get people into the city, it's hard to build the city, in my mind. And this is all still. You look at the empty buildings in Dubai, and it just still flabbergasts me. And they're almost manufacturing another wave of development now. You know, it's hyping it, and my favorite client is doing it. And it's just, you know, the bubble is going to burst again on them, I would guess, in time. So I think the key is, we like to think of ourselves as not just, you know, architects that do a single tower. We like to feel that we're helping build the city. And I don't get a sense that anybody else in Dubai.
Right. To even make anything like what we call public space meaningful in terms of the way we think of it as Westerners, is not there for over 85% of the populace, and that is primarily the populace for which all this other stuff is built. Right, you know, it's the British expats, it's the kind of mid-level management from South Asia, and so you get a very strange culture whereby the kind of these relations play themselves out in ways that are, I think, folded into those buildings, that architecture, in ways that are quite different than what we understand a city to be, which are very different than, for example, those areas of the traditional city that are, you know, predominantly settled by different groups throughout the Gulf area and in South Asia. So, you know, there'll be like a Pakistani community in a certain area of downtown, partly there to host families who are coming, or males who are coming across to work, and partly there to run their businesses. And there's a very active social public space there, even though they're residents, but they're not Emirati with any rights. You know, it's very interesting. And then you get the kind of upper middle level you know, CEO, international business executive kind of expat that float in a totally different scale of this building. So, you know, you can go and you can find all those fantastic spaces. You know, like you can go sit and get, you know, a fantastic cappuccino and sit in a simulated outdoor space, because it was, you know, 45 Fahrenheit when I was there. So, you know, you're in this kind of breezy outdoor space that's really an indoor space made to look like an outdoor space, and feel like you're in a kind of public domain with a bunch of other white middle-class Westerners, right? Or I could go to the alternative art scene and walk around on foot in a former industrial area, you know, 15, 20-minute walks between these gallery scenes and these gallery marches that would happen on certain nights, and find a kind of really sort of a highly ethnically diverse culture of alternative art production that you wouldn't expect, right? But you have to, it literally takes you an hour to get, you know, to get anywhere. So it's a different scale of development, right? I remember I was fortunate enough to have a driver when I was there, and I would say, you know, let's go here. And he'd kind of roll his eyes and he'd call his friends and be like, you know, and then, you know, we'd go there and the road wasn't actually there that was on the map, so we'd have to take another route. And you know, it was actually, it would take us like 2.5 hours to get to a development. And then you get there and there's like, you know, 20,000 people living there in like a grassy community. I mean, just really kind of bizarre relations that all happen within this one construct of a so-called city.
Unless there's someone who has a burning question.
I do have one from our camera lady. I guess we should.
It's kind of long, so here it goes. So first, are the individual cities, or island cities as you call it, have a defining boundary? Because in the old, we know cities have like a wall. And then in the new, like you have suburbans or satellite cities that just sprawl and grow in size. In business, we have lot boundaries. But in reality, in part, we can see that occupancy spreads out. In a sense, it's up to the architect to design the transition zone and boundary. At least that's what we're taught in school, to design the space. But at the moment, the projects that we've seen currently in the Gulf, they're kind of islands, so they're separated. And they try to, there's a competition that I see, like trying to develop a better city, something better than the old and better than everything else. So how is a transition zone planned? If not planned, how do the two cities or more interact with each other as the people and attention is moving to the new, abandoning the old? And further, architecture as social mediator or service provider, and in relation to business, keeping people do you keep the people in the old projects? How does architecture, on the scale of providing service to private state financial driven goals, deal with this, or at least in ideology?
That was a long question.
Too long, but
You could
interesting.
break that down.
I think there are two questions there.
You know,
I'm not a presenter. She's asking.
That's cheap. It never stopped you from talking before.
Well, you know, George, when you I hadn't ever had a chance to meet Mohammed Adabar, but worked with a number of the people in his office in terms of talking about the downtown Dubai development. Also, because I was there at the mall, for the mall, I was working with people from DP Architects, representatives who were still there. It's a Singaporean firm that did the mall. What's interesting is the autonomy of those individual developments. So, you know, you asked the question about the walled city, and in a way, it's walled partly by aesthetic choice, in that, you know, there's a kind of mega block structure of these super highways, and often the plots are just simply defined by them, and then everything is within, because you turn to the outside and you're dealing with a 2-story, you know, 8-lane highway structure, which is kind of unpleasant to walk near. But they're also partly defined just by the autonomy of the project. So, you know, I remember the mall, as it was trying to negotiate how to deal with 14,000 parking spaces, was trying to figure out how to fit in this kind of narrow space, another garage right next to the Burj Khalifa. And you can see it. It's like one of those clumsiest architecture spaces where it's like one project just goes, the other, you know, right? And then there's this kind of like someone put some trees there in between. So I don't blame either of the architects for that, but I think they're given a certain degree of autonomy within this model of planning that doesn't allow for, nor is it complemented by an expertise for the interstitial. Right? And I don't know if you found that. Like, did you work beyond the boundary at all in that project in terms of?
You know, but it goes back to what I was saying before, and the plan of Dubai is really done by transportation planners.
Yeah, yeah.
And they came in, or the engineers, and just did big highways. And the walled city, they are walled cities because you can't cross an 8-lane expressway or highway. This is a real problem there. You can be 100 yards across a building you want to get to on Sheikh Zayed Road, and it'll take you half an hour to get there because there's no way of getting there. So the idea of no planning, no real city planning, is to me has always been an issue in going there. The Burj Khalifa, even, you know, KAFD in Riyadh, they're islands, and they're walled by roads. And you can't really transition to other neighboring communities like the way we like to knit cities together.
It took Tom Cruise, by the way, less than 30 minutes.
Something about Tom Cruise.
I kind of want to follow up on this designing outside the boundaries you were set for, but in a way which reflects back on the map George showed of SOM as a global organization with cities everywhere, and sort of resonating with Brian's observation that you might never live in an empty tower, but you might invest in it from abroad, and so not have to be local. But George, could you relate to us the aggressiveness with which SOM's pro bono work, such as it may be, has learned to say our major investment in, I don't know if SOM puts up empty towers, but our major investment as offering a level of expertise that far exceeds our competitors, such that we won't do free competitions. We will get paid to do work for high-end clients, for high-end fees, is actually very politically motivated in that it supports a level of pro bono work outside the boundaries of that condition, somewhere else in the world where we aggressively pursue offering free architectural services for someone who can't afford it. And I don't know, to what degree is SOM aggressive as a pro bono corporation that has worldwide reach, paid for by projects like this?
Yeah, we do a substantial amount of work giving back to community, and most of it's centered in our own city. And each one of the offices do that pretty well. I was talking to Nicoletta earlier about a community in Chicago where a church burned down, and we redesigned the church for them pro bono, which is not a small feat. It wasn't like giving $10,000 or $15,000 to a charity organization, which we do. We support. I mean, we support many within our own home city. We don't venture outside beyond our city as much as we maybe should. But we do try to give back to communities where we do work. Like in Dubai, we always make contact with the university to try to share knowledge and to give lectures with the experts that we have in our firm and help the architecture school, trying to spread the profession in that way, pro bono. Yeah, we don't normally promote that. It's kind of a private thing. The SOM is privately held, so a lot of the monies that we spend either in pro bono or give to charitable organizations is we like to keep it quiet. We don't like to flaunt that too much.
I have a burning provocation, so I need to interrupt in here and go back before we forget the point that Brian raised. I'm going to go back to it. I'm going to do the same thing as the organizers did to people on campus and ask all of you in here, what is, in your history of architecture, what is the city that is usually presented to us as the most satisfactory in terms of public spaces, in terms of its notion of the public? No? No? Florence, perhaps. But what is the model that everyone is going back to? Athens, 5th century BC, Pericles, Athens, correct? Brian was actually telling us that you have different population for which the architecture of Dubai is addressed at different levels. So there are people in Dubai who actually do have citizenship rights and perhaps actually express their citizenship rights. And perhaps we could analyze the architecture of Dubai for those citizens who are using the city as citizens ought to use the city. Do you know what the percentage of those people in Dubai is? Do you know the percentage of the natives in Dubai? 11%, perhaps, I don't know, I mean, but let's say 11%. Do you know the percentage of people in Athens who actually use the public space in Athens? At the time of Pericles. Basically where we got our idea of democracy, where we got our idea of going to a public space and expressing your own political rights. Do you know the percentage of the people? 17%. And the rest were not citizens. They had no rights. So the city that we are usually introduced to, Athens, 5th century BC, as the model of a civic space, this is the first civic space that we've had in history, served 17% of the population. They had to be men, free, and adult, and natives. So if you're a foreigner, and 40% of the inhabitants of Athens in the 5th century BC was foreign, you had no right. You know what? Who is the most famous example of someone who lived in Athens, had no right as a citizen, and died because of that? Anyone knows? Anyone taking Philosophy 101? Aristotle was not a citizen, had no right in the city of Athens because he was a foreign-born person. Women had absolutely no right. And the most interesting thing that brings us to today's image, slaves had no rights. Athens was built by slaves and they had no right for the city. Same thing as the people that are building Dubai today. So humanity somehow actually didn't move from that time to today. But we tend to celebrate some moments and we tend to criticize other moments, and I think all of it is political.
Can take questions from the other side, so I'm going to come over there. So while someone thinks about something. Take some questions from the Any questions here?
Good. I have a question about this rising class or the ruling class of Arab males that tend to be directing, the city. I had the fortune of visiting Lower Manhattan and the development that SOM is doing there. And I get the sense that everyone involved would be very disappointed if those buildings were unoccupied, that it would be considered a failure. But the projects that we've seen today, I don't get the sense that many of them are empty and it is just as successful as it was intended to be. So my question is about the ambitions of the people commissioning this work, and the question of are architects in this area image makers, almost fashion photographers for a sense of identity. Is that what are your comments on that?
From the first days that I went to Dubai, it was interesting to see how these properties were handed out to people to develop. Some had direct ownership, some had were given sites like the bigger sites. And they always, we ended up calling them perfume bottles, you know, that you see going down the strip there. But the interesting part of all that was, I lost my train of thought there, but is that the people were successful in selling. And the developers, the early developers in Dubai, before Sheikh Zayed Road was done, before the marina was built, before JBR was done, was that they found a kind of recipe for quick success. And the quick success was to sell residential. And this is when they changed kind of the housing laws. People were getting used to buying apartments in high-rise buildings, and most of these investors in the buildings that were giving the money to the developers so they could make money were not necessarily from Dubai, or they're all from outside. I mean, the people that are buying into the Emaar projects, they call up worldwide to buy sight unseen the building. So the early days I saw it as being a quick turnaround of money was really the issue, and that has been rampant throughout all of the developments. That they're empty. They're just investors buying and with the hope of getting some return back. I don't know without getting people in those apartments, they're not going to get any return. So these people have the ability to sit on those, and hopefully they increase in value over time. But the success was selling those units. And seeing how fast you could sell them to get your money out of them. A lot of laws were put into place to protect the seller too after a while, because some not so good developers would take everybody's money, then leave town, never build a building. So there was a lot of that happening at that time.
But I would also answer, I mean, there was, you know, I know, like pot kettle here, I mean, because I sound so cynical sometimes, but I think there's a cynicism in your question about architects as image makers that I would allay a little bit and turn, I guess to partly answer the provocation I ended my small piece with which is to turn that into an agency of architecture, right? So as the development scaled from the 50s through the major boom in the late 20th century, then to the more recent one, the different attitudes about what would bring people there changed, but ultimately revolved around the open trade zone attitude of Dubai, right? So as a free port, it historically has an attitude, a very liberal attitude towards exchange and exchange of anything, right? I can bring anything there and trade it at the free port. And so it literally transformed from the small port on the canal where I can still trade, you know, little small goods on boats to the really, you know, ginormous port that they built out of the city where huge industrial trading happens. But that's also the concept behind the free enterprise zones. And so little chunks of land in the middle of the landmass are carved out as kind of free, not called trade zones, but free development zones. And in there, all sorts of new models for experimentation can take place. And so a lot of the development along Sheikh Zayed Road is that. And so as the more recent model of development, it led to a kind of architectural experimentation to bring people there. And to bring people there in this kind of international kind of investment or speculation or actual sort of migration, you have to do it visually, right? It has to be a spectacular building that offers amenities that no one else has. You know, like the invention of the, how many, what is the, you know, the Burj Hotel has how many stars? Like, they added a new star, right? Like you couldn't, it's like there's, it's
seven.
Yeah, the only reason it's a 7-star hotel is because no one ever said we need a 7-star hotel. They just said, well, add a star, right? You know, and so, you know, these kind of strange kind of mechanics are, yes, about image production, but image production as an agency to bring investment or residents or occupants such that money could be made, right? And so there's a loop there that puts architecture at a very kind of central role in developing that agency. And I think, you know, what we often validate as kind of architecture with a capital A operates in its aesthetic domain with a slightly different discourse, but it's the same discourse, right? You know, and so it's, you know, it's a Zaha project, it's a UN studio project, it's a Hani Rashid project. What? the Gary project, right? You know, that sort of operate on more aesthetically experimental grounds, let's say, that might bring people or serve as an attractant. But I think that same thing is operating at many different aesthetic scales in many of those different projects, right? But it's an agency of architectural production rather than a dismissal of architectural production, I would say.
I wish we had half an hour to discuss that one.
Very quick comments, actually. Again, just perhaps to build on Brian's comment, I'm still actually interested in the notion of the image, and I would like to question that agency at the level of architecture and move it in a different direction. It's actually the image in here is the commodification of the image of architecture, or architecture as a commodified image is what we are producing in there. And for that, we need to go back to a little bit of history. Brian actually pointed out to something very important. That region is not a productive region except for the arrival of oil. It's a region of exchange in history. Those of you who were in my lecture yesterday, I actually started from 2000 BC. All the settlements in there were basically trading settlements. This is just a trading region, doesn't produce anything before oil. So that is probably inscribed in the DNA of the region one way or another. But the most important historicizing aspect, or if you want bringing in history to this discussion, is that Dubai would have been impossible before the invention of futures and derivatives. You have to see it in relationship to the development of financial tools that have allowed real estate to become like stocks. You buy them in the hope of future benefit. There is absolutely no longer any function of sheltering, providing services, wherever. You are looking at it literally as an investment tool, and you have to make the investment tool as attractive as possible. Therefore, architecture is being brought in to do that. And in a sense, the functionality of architecture is no longer relevant.
Those two definitions, the one you gave and the one Brian gave, almost perfectly fit advertising, right? Image.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's branding. Architecture as a branding tool is what we are seeing.
Hi, me again. Hello. Today was really interesting because it was very much about Dubai. And yesterday was interesting because it was about 3, maybe 4 different cities that we were looking at closely. One of the things that I think a lot of people kind of forgot or overlooked was, the transition from Burj Dubai to Burj Khalifa, and some of the conflict and the tension that arose from that. It's not just that the money was lost, the financial crisis and things like that. And because all three of you have a lot of experience, having been there and done research and things like that, could you start to describe maybe some of like the internal conflicts of the architectural production? They're not just that, it's an investment and architecture is lost, so it's not necessarily the debate we've been talking about is architecture and versus political activism, but maybe more of the conflict of architecture inside itself and how some investments are fighting against one another. We've talked about some of the financial and legal boundaries of Dubai and how it's kind of plotted. What happens when, there's a conflict between an Emirati in Abu Dhabi versus an Emirati in Dubai, and where the money is going and how the transactions kind of conflict with themselves? What are the internal conflicts, in the Middle East, but specifically in this architectural production?
I don't know. I have no idea either.
Do you remember 1920 in New York?
I wasn't around.
No, I know. But you must have studied it. Because there's the Tamani, was it called Tamani? Anyone can correct me? There was a period in time in which New York land was parceled out in a very nepotistic way that is not very different than what is happening in Dubai. There always, you have power manipulation. Once land becomes commodified, once land becomes actually something that you could develop, you have that kind of development that we are seeing in Dubai. I'm actually fascinated by the notion of how the land is parceled out and on what right, who owns the land. How do you actually define ownership of land in Dubai? Is it a right of birth? Is it a right of some sort of a class system? Is it a right system? All of these have not been discussed. So when in the distinction and the movement from a Burj Dubai to a Burj Khalifa, perhaps what you are saying is that at the end of the day, architecture, but not architecture in how we teach it in schools, building, let's actually put it this way, as investments have failed, and they needed the rescue of capital, an injection of capital that is directly coming in to lift the Burj Khalifa or Dubai at that time from itself. It was too ambitious on, for its own benefit.
Yeah, I've been asked to bring this
I wonder
to
if George
close.
answer that question.
Oh.
I mean, you were at the epicenter of this particular one, right?
The change of the name over, what we had no clue what was going on, you know. And while we read what's happening in the papers, these are happening at high levels that none of us will understand. There is no rules there, and somebody just decided that it's going to happen. But we found out that a name change just like everybody else did on that January 10th day. So.
It was either this or Emirates was going to be absorbed by Etihad. So the Dubaians went for the easier solution.
I want to thank you all for being here, and all of you for being a participant, and for you guys for organizing such an incredible event. Just leave you with one thought. I thought it's important when we establish this kind of, let's call it transnational dialogues, looking at others. And as somebody from the global south, I'm used to be looked upon with a certain comfort of being criticized from the north towards the south. So I find it interesting that we're casting a look at Dubai, and we're looking at the Gulf, and we find complex issues about empty buildings, fantasy lands. Then I look at Syracuse and I say, go downtown. It's almost empty. We have our own Destiny USA, and we have our own Near West Side. So just want to leave you with that thought. Thank you very much again. Please help me welcome and thank our guest speakers.